So, hello everyone, let us continue with the discussion. So, if you a very quick recall, so notice that we are trying to construct the demand curve and supply curve in the context of a very stylized example. So, this is the information that is given to us about 6 participants in the market. 3 of them are designated as sellers, 3 of them are designated as buyers. So, in the previous lecture, we have constructed the supply curve. So, basically we said that seller 1 has 1 pencil, seller 2 has 2 pencils and seller 3 has 4 pencils. And we said right now we are not bothered about from where they got it, whether they incurred a cost. So, right now the sellers have been given their pencils and they are asked to sell those pencils. And what we learnt was that unsold pencils are worthless to the sellers because we have no information about what they are going to be doing with that. So, if they have a pencil, they would like to sell it as long as the price is greater than or equal to 0, right. So, we said that for any price p greater than or equal to 0, the quantity supplied is 7 units. And notice we constructed the supply curve as for all prices between 0 and potentially p equal to tending to infinity, the quantity supplied was always 7 units. So, the supply curve turns out to be a straight line. Okay. Then we started discussing the demand side of the market. So, I have just copied the same picture so that it is easy for us. And on the demand side, what we said is that we will start by guessing the price. Okay. So, we will start by guessing the price. So, we start by guessing the price. And ask what is the quantity demanded by each of the individual buyers. And we ask what quantity does each buyer want to buy. Then we aggregate the quantities across all the buyers to get what is the quantity demanded. And notice we started with round 1, where we started with a price of p equal to 1 rupee per unit. We used the information about the buyers and figured out that, so this is the information about buyers that we used. This information is what we used to determine how much does each buyer want to buy at a price of 1 rupee per unit. Okay. And we figured out that buyer 1 is indifferent between buying 1 unit or not buying at all. Buyer 2 is indifferent between buying 1 unit and not buying at all. And buyer 3 for sure is not going to buy any units. So, the total quantity purchased, i.e. the total quantity demanded, can be a number either 0 where none of the buyers want to buy, or 1 where just one buyer wants to buy, buyer 1 or buyer 2, and buyer 3 does not want to buy, or a maximum of 2 units where buyer 1 and buyer 2 want to buy 1 unit and buyer 3 does not want to buy at all. I have just captured that information on this picture and I have connected the 3 dots so that we can see it more clearly. Okay. So, that is the straight line that you see. Now, the takeaway there is that more is available because there are 7 units compared to what the buyers want to buy. Right. So, the maximum that people want to buy here at a price of 1 rupee per unit is actually 2 pencils, but 7 units are available. So, clearly there is a mismatch between what people want to buy at most and what is available. So, that means that a price of 1 rupee per unit cannot be the price which brings what the buyers want to buy and what the sellers want to sell into sort of what we call as an equality or an equilibrium state, right. So, this means that the price must fall. Okay. So, this is the main takeaway that we have from round 1. And notice we have also made a claim. We have said that several rounds of trading will be needed by the participants to understand the rules of the market, right. So, the buyers and sellers may not be able to understand everything in round 1 itself, and we will go through these multiple rounds of iterations to figure out what is the single price at which trade is going to take place. Okay. So, let us look at a round 2 example. So, let us let us look at round 2, and in round 2 I want to take a price which is lower than 1 rupee per unit. Okay. So, I have taken a price of 0.9 per unit, but you can choose a different price as well. So, let us take a price of rupees 0.9 per unit or per pencil. Okay. Now, you could also take a price of 0.75, 0.8. So, let us first do it with 0.9 and then we will repeat the exercises a couple of more times. Okay. And as before, I want to put the information about the buyers here. So, buyer 1, buyer 2 and buyer 3. Okay. And the number of pencils 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Okay. Now, so let us start with buyer 1. So, the price is 0.9 per pencil, right. So, as before, if they do not buy at all, which is where the quantity is 0 units purchased, there is no net gain, right. So, the net gain is the worth that they assigned minus what they pay in total, right. So, if they are not buying anything, I will just put a number 0 here. I will just put a number 0 here. Okay. Now, let us look at buyer 1 and let us say if buyer 1 wants to buy 1 pencil, what is going to happen? So, recall the information that is given here, right. So, 1 pencil worth in hand, 1 pencil held in hand is worth 1 rupee to buyer 1. Okay. Now the price of a pencil is 0.9. So, if he wants to buy a pencil, he will pay 0.9, get that pencil which is going to be worth 1 rupee to him. So, his net gain is going to be 1 minus 0.9, which is 0.1. Okay. So, let us capture that. So, if he buys 1, his net gain, which is the worth minus the total paid. Okay. So, net gain, which is the worth minus total paid, is actually 0.1. That is nice because that is a number strictly bigger than 0. So, unlike the previous case where buyer 1 was getting the same net gain by buying 1 unit and not buying, now clearly when the price of the pencil has gone down from 1 to 0.9 per unit, buyer 1 clearly has a net gain when he buys 1 unit, right. So, here buyer 1 is not going to be indifferent between not buying and buying. For sure, he is going to buy. What we need to check is he going to buy more than 1 pencil or not? Okay. So, let us go back again to the data here. If he buys 2 pencils, they are worth 1.5. Okay. Now, for each pencil he pays 0.9. So, for 2 pencils he will pay 1.8, 2 times 0.9. They are worth 1.5. So, 1.5 minus 1.8 is going to be minus 0.3, right. So, his net gains become negative. So, buying 2 pencils is not a very good strategy for buyer 1. What about 3 pencils? Well, they are worth 1.8, okay, but each pencil costs 0.9 to the buyer. So, he pays 3 times 0.9, which is 2.7, and they are worth 1.8. So, notice his net gain is 1.8 minus 2.7, which is minus 0.9, but more importantly it is going to be negative. And you can very easily check that for 4 or more pencils also his net gain is going to be negative. So, let us capture that information. I am not going to put the numbers here, all I will say is that they are going to be negative. So, as far as buyer 1 is concerned, there is no ambiguity, he is for sure going to buy 1 unit. Okay. Now, let us look at buyer 2. For buyer 2, 1 pencil held in hand is worth 1, he pays 0.9, so his net gain is 0.1, right. So, clearly that is bigger than 0. So, unlike the previous case where he was indifferent between not buying and buying, now for sure he is going to buy 1 unit over not buying. The thing that we need to check is he going to buy more than 1 unit? Okay. So, let us look at what the data says. For buyer 2, 2 are worth 1.3, right. So, 2 pencils are worth 1.3. So, he pays 0.9 per pencil. So, for 2 pencils he would have paid 1.8, 2 times 0.9. they are worth 1.3. So, his net gain is minus 0.5. Okay. So, that is going to be negative. And you can very easily check that even if he were to buy 3, they are worth 1.5, but he would have paid 3 times 0.9, which is 2.7. His net gain is going to be negative when he buys 3 pencils, and the same occurs when he buys 4 or more pencils, right. So, let us collect that information, and we will just say that the gains are going to be negative for all of these cases. So, buyer 2 is going to unambiguously buy exactly 1 unit, right. And finally, let us look at buyer 3. So, for buyer 3, 1 pencil is worth 0.5, he pays 0.9, so his net gain is minus 0.4, that is not good, so that is negative. 2 are worth 1, so he pays 1.8, gets 2 pencils worth 1 rupee, so his net gain is 1 minus 1.8, again negative, and for 3 or more also his net gains are going to be negative. So, not buying is the optimal choice for buyer 3, right, because in all of the other cases, whether he buys 1 pencil, 2 pencils or 3 or more pencils, his net gains are always going to be negative. So, if I capture that information here, I can just say that it is going to be negative for all of these cases. Okay. So, let us combine all of this information and ask, in round 2, when the price is 0.9 per unit, buyer 1 will buy 1 unit, buyer 1 will buy 1 unit. So, what we learn here is that at a price of 0.9 per pencil, buyer 1 clearly will buy 1 unit, buyer 2 clearly will buy, so buyer 1 will buy 1 unit, buyer 2 clearly will buy 1 unit, and buyer 3 will not buy at all. So, if I aggregate all of these 3 inputs that I have, the total quantity purchased is still going to be 2 units. The key difference between the previous case is that now notice I do not have this indifference between not buying or buying 1 unit or buying at most 2 units, right. Here there is just one unique choice. Buyer 1 for sure is going to buy only 1 unit, buyer 2 for sure is going to buy 1 unit, and buyer 3 decides not to buy at all. So, the takeaway is that when the price is 0.9, so I have 0.9 here, right. So, the quantity that is purchased by all the buyers combined is 2 units, right. Now, instead of 0.9, if I had taken a number 0.95, you can check, I would have still gotten the same answer, right. The total quantity demanded is 2 units, okay. So, I will urge you to check by taking few other prices, take a price of 0.8, take a price of 0.75, take a price of 0.6 and repeat this exercise, right. So, that will also help you to understand this better. It will also help you to play around with how to compute the net gains, so that you can understand at these various prices what are the total quantity demanded. So, the question for us is that is this new price, right, is this new price, so let us ask, is the new price which is P equal to 0.9 per unit, rupees 0.9 per unit, any better, right, any better than P equal to 1 per unit than the previous price, in bringing the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied closer, right. Is this any better in bringing the quantity demanded and quantity supplied closer? Now, clearly you can see that the quantity supplied is 7, the quantity demanded is a maximum of 2 units. So, there is still a mismatch, right. Buyers, more is available than what buyers want to buy. So, the answer continues to be no, right. So, the new price has not brought the quantity demanded and quantity supplied closer to each other, right. So, what should happen? the price will still fall. Right. So, notice what we are doing. We are starting by guessing the price. We started with the price of 1 rupee per unit. We learned that there was a mismatch. So, we said that because more is available than what people want to buy, the price should fall. We took a lower price, which is 0.9, and I just took a guess, right? 0.9 was a number that I took. You could have taken 0.8, somebody else could have taken 0.6, so on and so forth. And we found that even in round 2, it does not help us, right? So, the price must still fall, right? So, let us take a third price, and I am going to take a price of 0.5 because it is going to tell us something interesting. Okay, so round 3. So, let us look at round 3, and I take a price of P equals rupees 0.5 per unit. And as before, let us have the same information about the buyers. We have buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3, the number of pencils that they can buy, right? And we will try and enter the net gains following the usual rule of net gain is equal to the worth minus what I pay in total. Okay, so let us look at a price of 0.5. So, this is what the buyer pays to buy a pencil. So, let us start with buyer 1. Now, not buying clearly gives a net gain of 0, right. So, we will add that in a moment, but let us look at the other cases. If buyer 1 were to buy 1 unit, it is worth 1 rupee to him, he would have paid 0.5. So, 1 minus 0.5 would give him a net gain of 0.5. Okay. 2 are worth 1.5. But notice for 2 pencils, I would have paid 2 times 0.5, which is 1 rupee. I get 2 pencils, they are worth 1.5. So, my net gain is 1.5 minus 1, which is 0.5. So, let us make use of that information. So, I will add that this is 0. Buying 1 pencil gives me a net gain of 0.5. Buying 2 pencils also gives me a net gain of 0.5. Always recall, net gain is the worth minus the total paid. Okay. So, 2 pencils are worth 1.5. What I pay in total for 2 pencils is 2 times 0.5. So, my net gain is 0.5. Let us look at 3. Let us look at the case of 3 pencils for buyer 1. 3 are worth 1.8. Okay, so 3 are worth 1.8 to buyer 1. Now, for 3 pencils, you would have paid 3 times 0.5, which is 1.5, and they are worth 1.8. So, my net gain is 1.8 minus 1.5, which is 0.3, right. So, this is interesting because this is a scenario that we did not see in the previous rounds, right. In the previous rounds, either the net gain was 0, something positive, and then it became negative, right. So, look at round 2. It was either 0, something positive, and then it became negative, right. In round 1, it was 0 and then it became negative all along. So, now we are seeing a case where we are getting numbers which are bigger than 0, some numbers are bigger than the other, okay. And let us just put for 4 pencils. So, for 4 pencils, they are worth 1.85, but for 4 pencils, I would have paid 4 times 0.5, which is 2 rupees. So, 1.85 minus 2, which is negative. So, I will just put a negative sign here. So, this is negative. Now, so what should buyer 1 do? Now, here we need to impose an additional assumption on our model. If I impose the assumption that a buyer is going to buy as many pencils such that his net gain is going to be the highest, then my answer is going to be that he is going to buy either 1 or 2 units, correct, because 0.5 is the net gain that he gets by buying 1 pencil or 2 pencils. But if you put the assumption that you are going to keep on buying pencils as long as your net gains continue to be positive, then the buyer 1 is going to buy 3 pencils, right. So, we are going to impose the condition that, so the assumption that I am going to impose on the model is that buyers will buy units based on getting the maximum net gains. Right? That tells us that for buyer 1, the maximum out of these numbers is 0.5. So, his net gains are going to be maximized when he buys either 1 unit or 2 units. Let us repeat. So, now notice that it is getting mechanical. So, once you get a feel of how to compute the net gains, on successive rounds you just keep repeating that exercise. Now, let us look at buyer 2. So, for buyer 2, 1 pencil is worth 1 rupee, right, it is worth 1 rupee, he pays 0.5, so his net gain is 0.5, 2 are worth 1.3, so for 2 he would have paid 1 rupee, they are worth 1.3, so 1.3 minus 1 is 0.3, 3 or more are worth 1.5, right. So, I know that for 1, so let us get that information. So, when he buys 1, his net gain is going to be 0.5. When he buys 2, they are worth 1.3, but he pays 1, so that is going to be 0.3, and then for 3 it is going to be 0, and beyond that it is going to be negative. Okay. So, for buyer 2, based on this assumption, buyer 2's choice is going to be 2 pencils, Okay. And now let us look at buyer 3. So, for buyer 3, 1 held in hand is worth 0.5. So, his net gain is 0.5 minus 0.5, which is 0. 2 are worth 1. So, I pay 1 rupee 2 times 0.5 to get something which is worth 1. So, the net gain is still 0. 3 are worth 1.5. So, my net gain continues to be 0. So, notice for buyer 3, the answer is that the net gains are 0 units for all of these cases, right. So, let us just make a note for all of these cases, and for 4 and beyond you can check that it is going to be negative. So, I will just put a minus sign here. Okay. Now, what do I know? So, let us make use of this information. For buyer 1, the choice is either buy 1 or 2 units. For buyer 2 wants to buy 1 unit, and buyer 3 is indifferent between not buying 1 unit, buying 2 units or buying 3 units, right, because his net gains are 0 for all of these 3 cases. Notice, not buying is a perfectly valid choice for a buyer. Okay. So, if I make use of all of this information, what is the total quantity demanded? Well, the total quantity demanded could be a number as small as 2, where buyer 1 buys 1 unit, buyer 2 buys 1 unit, buyer 3 does not buy, or it could even be 3, where each of them buy 1 unit. The other combination is that buyer 1 buys 2 units, buyer 2 buys 1 unit, and buyer 3 buys 1 unit. So, that is 4, right. Similarly, you can say 2 plus 1 plus 2 is going to give me 5, and the max that I can reach is 2 plus 1, 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, right. So, the takeaway is that in round 3, when I took a price of 0.5 per pencil, the quantity demanded is a number as small as 2 units, and it could be as large a number as 6 units. So, let us try and get this information on this graph. So, at 0.5, so notice 0.5 is somewhere here, the quantity demanded is a number as small as 2, could be 3, could be 4, 5, or could be a number as high as 6. So, I will again connect these points just so that we can see it clearly. And I will ask you to check when you repeat this exercise that for all of these prices between 0.5 and 1, if you compute the total quantity demanded, you will find that the quantity demanded is a number which is equal to 2. So, you should check this. So, I will again connect all of these points. So, you can check that at a price of 0.8, the total quantity demanded is going to be 2 units. At a price of 0.6, the total quantity demanded is going to be 0.6, right. So, I will ask you to check. So, check for P equals 0.8 and 0.6 that the quantity demanded quantity demanded is 2 units. Okay. Now, so compared to the previous rounds, notice by lowering the price, the total quantity demanded has reached a maximum of 6 units here. So, now we are still 1 unit short of where the total quantity available is, right. So, the quantity supplied is 7 units, but the maximum quantity demanded at a price of 0.5 is 6 units. So, while there is still a mismatch, we are almost close to quantity supplied now, right. So, let us make a note of that. So, when the price P is rupees 0.5 per unit, the quantity demanded can be at most 6 units, right. So, there is still a mismatch. So, it is still less than the quantity supplied. So, it tells us that the price must still fall, right. So, notice what we have been doing in each. So, we have gone through 3 rounds, right, and our claim was that several rounds will be needed before we arrive at the price or the single price at which there is going to be a match between the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. We took P equal to 1 in round 1, P equal to 0.9 in round 2, P equal to 0.5 in round 3, right. So, you can keep repeating this exercise. In round 4, perhaps you can take a price which is equal to 0.15 or 0.25, right, whichever number that you want, and repeat this exercise. You will find something interesting, and you will ask whether the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are getting matched. Okay. So, now that you have a feel of how to compute the net gains and identify what the quantity demanded is going to be, let us do one final round, which is round 4, and I will take a price of P equals rupees 0.3 per unit. Okay. And you will find something interesting about this price, okay, just as even the price of 0.5 was interesting, right. So, let us just repeat this: B1, B2, B3, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 units, and these numbers continue to be 0 as before. Okay. So, the price is now 0.3, right. So, let us quickly now make a note. So, for buyer 1, he pays 0.3, gets 1 pencil which is worth 1. So, his net gain is going to be 1 minus 0.3, which is 0.7. Okay. So, the net gain is 0.7. So, let us make a note of that, 0.7. If he buys 2 are worth 1.5, right, each costs 0.3, So, you would have paid 2 times 0.3, which is 0.6. 1.5 is your worth. So, 1.5 minus 0.6 is 0.9. Okay. 3 are worth 1.8. So, for 3 you would have paid again 0.9. They are worth 1.8. So, your net gain is 1.8 minus 3 times 0.3, which is 0.9. Okay. So, here I get 0.9, which is clearly bigger than 0.7. So, buying 2 or buying 3 is better than buying 1 based on our assumption that I have, right. So, recall I have put this assumption that buyers will keep buying units based on getting the maximum net gains. Okay. So, now let us check for 4. 4 are worth 1.85, right. So, for 4 I will be paying 4 times 0.3, which is 1.2, and my net gain is going to be 0.65. Okay. So, but that is going to be lower. So, 0.65. Okay. So, here the choice is going to be either buy 2 units or buy 3 units for buyer 1. Okay. So, let us quickly compute for buyer 2 as well. So, for buyer 2, 1 is worth 1 rupee, you pay 0.3, so the net gain is 0.7. 2 are worth 1.3. So, for 2 you will pay 2 times 0.3, which is 0.6, 1.3 minus 0.6 is 0.7. So, for buyer 2, buying 1 unit and buying 2 units gives me the same net gain, which is 0.7. Okay. If this seems a little bit rushed, all I am doing is I am computing what the net gain is. You can actually take a repeat this exercise yourself as well. So, that is 0.7. For 3 units, it is 1.5, right, but for 3 units I would have paid 3 times 0.3, which is 0.9. So, my net gain is 1.5 minus 0.9, which is 1.6, which is 0.6 rather. And once it is reduced, I do not need to check what is going to happen more, right, because your cost of getting the pencils are going to be higher, and the net worth that you are going to get is not going to increase at that faster rate. Okay. So, I will not check for 4 pencils, and for buyer 3, let us repeat. So, I pay 0.3, it is worth 0.5. So, my net gain is 0.5 minus 0.3, which is 0.2. 2 are worth 1 rupee, but I pay 0.6. So, 1 minus 0.6 is 0.4, and 3 or more are worth 1.5. So, 1.5 minus 0.9 is 0.6. So, now for buyer 3, if I enter the values, you can do the arithmetic. So, you are going to get numbers 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, right. And for 4, notice, for buying 4 pencils, for buyer 3 it is worth 1.5, but you would have paid 1.2, 4 times 0.3. So, the net gain would have been 0.3. So, for buyer 3, the best choice is to buy 3 pencils, and for buyer 2, it is going to be 1 or 2 pencils. So, let us make a note of this. So, if I use this information, for buyer 1, the choice is either buy 2 or 3 units. For buyer 2, it is buy 1 or 2 units, and buyer 3 is going to buy 3 units, which means that the total quantity purchased by all the 3 buyers combined can be a number as small as 6. Buyer 1 buys 2, buyer 2 buys 1, and buyer 3 buys 3 units, or can be 2 plus 2, 4 plus 3, 7. That is an interesting number, because that is exactly equal to the quantity supplied, or can be a maximum of 8 units, right. So, now if I capture that information on this picture, I am going to get at a price of 0.3, so 0.3 is here, the quantity demanded is a number as small as 6, or could be 7, or could be 8. And you can check for all of these prices, the line is still going to be a straight line. And if you had taken, so now you can see the trend, right, it sort of is looking like this stepped or the staircase sort of a picture. And if you take other prices, it will continue to look somewhat like this. This line that you have is telling us what is the quantity demanded at each and every price, and that is my demand curve. Okay. So, all that we have done is we have made use of the information that was given to us, and we have constructed the supply curve and the demand curve. Next, we will talk about equilibrium and mention about a few other aspects related to demand and supply. Thank you.